History is written by armies, by the clash of steel, the strategies of generals, and the ambitions of kings. But in the year 1212, a different kind of army appeared in the pages of history. An army that defied all logic. An army that carried no weapons, that sought no plunder, that was led by no king. Its soldiers were peasants. Its soldiers were shepherds. Its soldiers were children. And their story is one of the most baffling and heartbreaking episodes of the medieval age. To understand how this could happen, we must first understand the world of 1212. The great Crusades to reclaim the Holy Land had been raging for over a century. The idea that Jerusalem was a sacred duty, a prize to be won for Christendom, had seeped into the very soul of Europe. But the great armies of knights and kings had often failed, their campaigns marred by politics, greed, and violence. In this atmosphere of fervent and often frustrated faith, a new idea began to take hold. An idea both beautiful and dangerously naive. Perhaps the reason the knights had failed was because their souls were impure, their motives tainted. Perhaps the Holy Land could not be won with swords, but only with the pure, untainted faith of the innocent. And who was more innocent than a child? In France, a young shepherd boy named Stephen of Cloyes began preaching. He claimed to have a letter for the French king delivered to him by Jesus himself. He had a charisma that was almost hypnotic. He spoke of a divine mission. He said that he could gather the children of France, march to the sea, and God would part the waters for them. They would walk to Jerusalem on dry land and convert the Muslims not with violence, but with the sheer power of their faith. At the same time, in Germany, a boy named Nicholas of Cologne began a similar movement. He too was a shepherd, and he too preached a message of a peaceful crusade. His charisma was so great that he gathered a following of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. His goal was the same: march south, over the great Alps to the sea, where God would perform his miracle. These were not organized campaigns. They were spontaneous, grassroots movements, fueled by a mixture of religious fervor, social discontent, and a desperate desire for a miracle in a harsh world. Adults tried to stop them. Priests condemned them. The Pope himself was skeptical. But you cannot reason with a divine vision. Tens of thousands of children left their homes. Some were adolescents, but many were younger. They were the poor, the landless, the hopeful. They abandoned their plows and their workshops and began to march. The journey was an immediate descent into hell. Nicholas led his followers from Germany towards Italy. To get there, they had to cross the Alps. They were not an army with supply lines. They were a ragged procession, starving, dressed in rags, begging for food. They froze to death in the mountain passes. They were preyed upon by wolves and by men. By the time Nicholas's army stumbled into the Italian city of Genoa, their numbers had been cut by more than half. They marched to the harbor. They waited. They prayed. And the sea did not part. The miracle had failed. The core belief that had driven them across a continent had shattered on the shores of the Mediterranean. Some of the children, disillusioned, stayed in Genoa. Others followed Nicholas to the city of Pisa, where the same crushing disappointment awaited them. Some of his followers eventually made it to Rome, where the Pope, Innocent III, praised their zeal, but gently released them from their vows and told them to go home. Very few ever made it back. They had simply vanished into the fabric of medieval Europe. The fate of Stephen's French crusade was even darker. They, too, marched south, their numbers dwindling with every step. When they reached the port city of Marseille, they also waited for the sea to part. And again, it did not. But then a different kind of miracle appeared. Or so it seemed. Two merchants named Hugh the Iron and William the Pig came forward and offered to help. They had 7 ships, and they would, out of the goodness of their hearts, transport all the remaining children to the Holy Land for free. It was the answer to their prayers. Thousands of hopeful children boarded the ships and set sail. They were never seen in Europe again. Years later, the story was pieced together by a traveling monk. Of the 7 ships, 2 had been shipwrecked in a storm, killing everyone on board. The other 5 had not sailed to the Holy Land. The 2 merchants had sailed directly to the coast of North Africa, where they sold every single child into slavery in the markets of Algiers and Alexandria. The army of innocence had been betrayed by the very worst of human greed. For centuries, this was the story. A tragic, almost fairy tale-like account of misguided faith. But modern historians ask a deeper question. Did it really happen like this? Was it truly an army of children? The Latin word used in the Chronicles is puer. While it can mean boys or children, it was also a common term for the rural poor, the landless, the have-nots. Perhaps what the Chronicles were describing was not a literal army of schoolchildren, but a massive, unauthorized social pilgrimage of the desperately poor. A movement of people who had nothing left to lose, who threw their faith into one last desperate gamble for a better life. Over time, the story of the poor man's crusade may have been romanticized and transformed into the more memorable, more tragic story of the children's crusade. But in the end, it does not matter. Whether they were boys and girls of 12 or starving peasants of 20, their story remains a haunting testament to a world gone mad with faith. They were an army that never fought a battle, that never reached its destination. They were a river of hope that flowed south, only to vanish into the sea and into the desert, leaving behind nothing but a whispered cautionary tale. A story of a lost generation, marching toward a miracle that found only a merciless world.